I grew up in not a Christian family. However, we went to church, but I wasn't indoctrinated. And so what that looked like was we went to church Sundays, but I wasn't taught the Bible. No one in my family read the Bible. It was like my parents didn't, shelter me in any way. We just went to church. That was it. And so once I was old enough to not go to church, I stopped going to church. And I didn't care for God, or while those times I went to church, nothing came from that. It wasn't like it marked me or anything. And because it wasn't pushed on me, there was no fear or actual true, faith in it. And so with that being said, as I grew up, um, that wasn't something that was on my mind. And by the time I was 12 years old, I started to basically deal with depression. I didn't really know that it even was depression at the time. When you're that young, you don't really know what's actually going on. But I think around 12 was when I started to notice, like, I feel like I'm dealing with something that most of my friends aren't. Like I think this like weight of depression and like almost the zest and joy for life was already like kind of sucked out of me. And looking back, and I really honestly started to see this only a couple years ago. Looking back, I would attribute that to I got molested when I was like 8 or 9 in Puerto Rico by my cousin, and he did something, and I just kind of ignored it and just kind of was like that. I knew that was wrong and it was weird, and something happened, and I just forgot about it, right, and moved on with my life. But I think that now looking back, I realized that really switched how I viewed things, especially affection from family. Like I got very, even to this day, like there's times where I'm like with, like my mom's, I'm Puerto Rican. So like my mom, Spanish people are very like touchy, and you know what I mean? That's how they express their, feelings. And so I'm still kind of like put off towards certain, just certain levels of affection from, family. But anyways, so that kind of transition. By the time I was 12, I started dealing with depression and like this rage internally and all these things. And so I started smoking weed, and I'll never forget the first time I smoked weed. It was like, oh, life makes sense now. It was like, this is it. This is the missing, puzzle piece of my life, and this is what life's about. And I felt funnier and more full of life. And so that started, and I got my parents found out about it by the time I was 14. And so my mom is from she's from a family, and my dad as well, from, there's addiction and mental illness in their families. So my mom instantly kind of panicked, I think. And so she's like, oh, I don't want him to start doing drugs. So let's get this taken care of. So she started putting me in programs and stuff like that at like 14. And I started going to juvie, and just, I started at that moment going in and out of JDC and juvie and rehabs and programs. And
You think
I
any of
think
that helped, or did it make it worse?
it made it worse. Like because for one, people need to want to change, think they have a problem. You know what I mean? Like I was completely not even believing I had an issue, that I wanted to change. I thought this stuff was saving my life.
Mm.
And then also on top of that, I was a 14, 15-year-old kid that was just like smoking weed. I think I had tried a couple things and, drank, but now I'm 17, or around like 17-year-old kids in programs that are like real heroin addicts and real crackheads. And me being innocent, I'm like, well, in my eyes at least, me being innocent at that time, like I'm looking at these kids and it's feeding my curiosity. So now I'm like, well, dang, that sounds fun. I'm trying to go try that when I get out of here.
Um,
And so yeah, it kind of backfired. It got me more curious and more, suspicious about things. But so that basically started, and then by the time I was 16, I got put on probation for the first time. And when I got put on probation, I couldn't keep smoking weed because I kept getting locked up over it. So I started doing pills. And by the time I was, before I turned 17, I was shooting up heroin. And so that began a long, basically 9-year process of overdoses, drugs, rehab, and mental illness. And now the thing I'll touch on quickly is the mental illness is like, I was a full-blown heroin addict, but I was also extremely depressed. I self-harmed, I cut myself, I burned myself, um I hated myself and I hated life. I was always like, I always felt this need that there's more to this. Like I always had that internal, even in my most lost days, I always had this internal knowing that I was here for something. Like, I always had this feeling, like, I would tell my dad even reminded me the other day, like, "You'd always tell me, like, it's gonna work out." You know, like, I'd always be like, "No, it'll work out one day." But I didn't actually, like, believe that, but I really felt that, and now I know that was the word God spoke over my life, you know?